Now that we're about to cross over that 100-day mark for this new administration, I think one thing that has become pretty abundantly clear is that Donald Trump is the wannabe authoritarian that everybody was warning about. And late last week, he escalated his attacks against the judiciary by sending the DOJ into Wisconsin and arresting a circuit court judge on 2 felony counts. They claim that this judge was obstructing justice and hiding or concealing an undocumented immigrant. And I'm not going to discuss whether or not the judge was right or wrong in this case, because I don't think we have enough information to establish that quite yet. But what I will say is that this is not how judges are supposed to be treated in the United States. Instead, we have a very fascistic administration who is trying to assert its dominance over the judiciary because, as you know, Trump has been getting shot down left and right in the courts, especially when it comes to the topic of immigration. And I think that this was a way for the authoritarian regime to try to give a show of force to the American people while trying to intimidate other judges into doing what this administration wants them to do. And I think that story became even more clear when Pam Bondi rushed over to Fox News like an excited child, where she tried to slander this judge's name before any of the facts of the case even made it into court. So let's go ahead and take a look at her retelling of these events. And if you guys do appreciate my work, please do remember to subscribe.
The judge learns that ICE was outside to get the guy because he had been deported in 2013, came back in our country, commits these crimes, charged with committing these crimes, victims in court. Judge finds out. She goes out in the hallway, screams at the immigration officers. She's furious, visibly shaken, upset, sends them off to talk to the chief judge. She comes back in the courtroom. You're not going to believe this. Takes the defendant and the defense attorney back in her chambers, takes them out a private exit and tells them to leave, while a state prosecutor and victims of domestic violence are sitting in the courtroom.
Why is the Attorney General of the United States going on national television to try to slander this judge's name before the case has even been before a judge? Why is that happening in the United States? What happened to Attorney General being impartial before these cases actually wound up before a judge? What happened to being innocent until proven guilty? Instead, we have Pam Bondi, who is trying to sully this judge's name and trying to paint this narrative that we have all of these judges across the country who are just not complying with the Trump administration, even though these judges have no obligation to comply with the federal government when it comes to immigration law. The 10th Amendment says that, these states cannot be forced to enforce immigration law because the immigration law is the sole purview of the federal government. So what normally happens is you have a federal government who works in cooperation with state agencies to try to get their work done. But instead, you now have a fascistic administration who is trying to bully their way through this whole process. And now they're pissing off judges all around the country. And these judges have every right to be pissed off. Pam Bondi goes on to say that she's real happy that they're going after judges now.
So when you see these judges trying to obstruct your efforts to make this country safer, what is your message to them?
We are going to prosecute you, and we are prosecuting you. I found out about this the day it happened. We could not believe, actually, that a judge really did that. We looked into the facts in great depth. That's her picture up on the screen, Hannah Dugan, who is now in custody. You cannot obstruct a criminal case, and really, shame on her. It was a domestic violence case of all cases, and she's protecting a criminal defendant over victims of crime.
What is wrong with these people? They're putting her picture up on the screen. What's wrong with Fox News? Just taking Pam Bondi at her word, trying to paint this judge as some hardened criminal who is hiding illegal immigrants, as they would say. I mean, this is absolutely absurd. It is disgusting. It is gross. In no world should the Attorney General be on national TV trying to slander this judge's name before she has had her day in court. That is just not how we are supposed to do things here in the United States. You wouldn't want this to be you Could you imagine being arrested for a crime that maybe you didn't do, and then you've got the Attorney General going on Fox News and saying that, oh yeah, you're a hardened criminal, she's totally guilty, she definitely did this, absolutely shame on her. I mean, guys, we should expect better from our DOJ. Pam Bondi is an awful human being. She then goes on to say that this judge is actually deranged.
Have you dug into their motive? Like, what inspired them to carry out these acts and harbor criminals?
They're deranged is all I can think of. I cannot believe, I think some of these judges think they are beyond and above the law, and they are not. And we're sending a very strong message today. If you are harboring a fugitive, we don't care who you are. If you are helping hide one, if you are giving a TDA member guns, anyone who is illegally in this country, we will come after you and we will prosecute you. We will find you.
If I could just finish off with this idea, very significant development that you're arresting judges now. Now, it could be that the judges have engaged in terribly bad behavior and deserve to be arrested. But you know what critics will say? They'll say, oh, this is a government that is expanding the powers of the Article 1 of the Constitution. Now they're arresting judges. How do you respond to that?
No one is above the law, John. No one is above the law in this country. And if you are destroying evidence, if you are obstructing justice, when you have victims sitting in a courtroom of domestic violence and you're escorting a criminal defendant out a back door, it will not be tolerated, and it is a crime in the United States of America. Doesn't matter who you are, you're going to be prosecuted.
Now, I'll say again, I don't know what the facts in the case, or in this case, are. I am not going to take Pam Bondi's word for it, that's for damn sure. But I find it really hard to believe that a judge was as malicious as they are trying to describe. And as you see here, Pam Bondi is trying to assign malintent. She's trying to, ascribe motive to this judge. And again, her court date isn't until, I think, May 15th. And it is absolutely inappropriate for the Attorney General to go out there and say, yes, this person is guilty. This is exactly what happened. This was her motive. And actually, she's deranged because she was trying to hide undocumented immigrants. That is just not okay. We should not be doing things like this in the United States. And I think it's the Trump administration who is actually the one who is muddying up the administration of justice. Just think about what actually happened here, right? You've got a Trump administration, you've got ICE officials going into a state court and trying to bully their way through, trying to ruffle feathers, trying to get the court to cooperate with how they want to do things, when the court has absolutely no obligation to do that. And in fact, Judge Dugan's obligation is to make sure that she is seeking justice in her courtroom. And even if you have an undocumented immigrant there who may have committed this misdemeanor domestic battery, I believe it was, domestic battery, you got that person there who came to court, who showed up, who did the right thing to face justice. And Judge Dugan's responsibility is to make sure the victims of that crime get the justice that they deserve. And instead, you have a fascistic administration who is coming in and trying to brute force their way through this whole process, and now going to arrest a judge so they could put on some sort of show for the rest of America. And I just want you guys to get a sense of just how unprecedented treating a judge like this actually is. I mean, you have somebody, a judge, Judge Dugan, who has been serving in this role for nearly a decade, who is an upstanding member of her community, who has been administering justice for quite some time, and you come in there and arrest her in her own courtroom and perp walk her through her own place of work? Andrew McCabe just describes how absolutely insane that truly is.
I mean, I think when you start looking at how the judge was treated after the events that led to the charge, so where and when and how she was arrested, and the fact that she was arrested at the courthouse rather than her own residence, the fact that she was placed in a jail cell for hours before her arraignment was called in the court later in the afternoon, these things are unprecedented. Typically, upstanding members of the community who have no criminal history and aren't accused of a violent act are allowed to self-surrender at the time of their arraignment. The fact that they did not offer that courtesy to her, and instead went out of their way to treat her harshly, I believe is an act of performative cruelty on behalf of the Department of Justice, which is not the way any Department of Justice should be acting. Then their conduct in going directly to the media and spiking the football over this arrest of a member of the judiciary, also a departure from policy, totally unnecessary, and I think inappropriate by an attorney general and an FBI director.
Yeah, and he's exactly right about that. What happened to the attorney general reserving any comment before the case has actually been tried before a court of law? What happened to not commenting on an ongoing investigation or a case that was still open? What happened to those rules and those norms? And like he was saying, for you to go into her courtroom, to place her in handcuffs, to perp walk her through her own courtroom, and then let her sit in a jail cell for hours before she had to go to arraignment, I mean, it's all just absolutely disgusting. This is not how we are supposed to be treating our judges in this country. Even if the judge did do what they claimed that she did, this would still not be an appropriate way to act in a state court like that. This just goes to show that the Trump administration is trying to intimidate other people into cooperating with exactly how this administration wants them to act. This is how fascist regimes work, right? They try to rule by fear. They try to rule by fiat. They try to make sure that everybody is complying with exactly how they want things to be. And so they are, sending a shot across the bow and saying, hey, judges, you better watch out. If you stand in our way, if you do anything that's outside of the lines when it comes to our immigration crackdown, well, you better watch out. We might come arrest your ass. That is how authoritarian regimes work. That is what we are seeing here. It's absolutely uncalled for. It is un-American. It is disgusting. And this is all just a way for Donald Trump to play the big, bad, tough guy on TV. This is all a performance. This is what we have come to expect from this new Trump administration, and it was what we were warning about before he even got arrested. And I want to go ahead and show you this one last clip, because it's not just the implications for, working with courthouses and other agencies across the country. Just think about all the other implications that she lays out here.
To Ken's point earlier, let's be clear. I have worked with Republican and Democratic law enforcement officials, mayors, state officials, judges, and the reasons for these policies are not to sort of like shelter or harbor somebody who is here unlawfully. It's to build trust in their communities for the reasons you indicated, but also law enforcement feel that way. They rely on the citizens to report crimes, to show up as witnesses, to, send their kids to school without worrying that they're going to be detained if they do that, right? And if you ruin that trust by doing not what they're doing what the law requires when it comes to, providing the information that the law requires them to provide to federal immigration enforcement. But the federal immigration law is based on voluntariness of states and locals. And in fact, it would violate the 10th Amendment to force state and local officials to help enforce a federal regulatory scheme, federal immigration.
It relies on a certain amount of cooperation.
They want more cooperation, but there is no requirement of cooperation.
Yeah, she's exactly right. And I think that's probably something that not many people remember, okay? The 10th Amendment says, I think the Supreme Court has even held multiple times, that the federal government cannot force state agencies to enforce federal law, especially when it comes to things like immigration, because immigration is the sole purview of the federal government. So when you are the feds, you count on the cooperation with other state agencies to get your work done. And when you've got a fascistic administration who is just trying to bully their way through the whole process, when they're showing up at courtrooms to try to make arrests, you're just throwing a wrench in the whole entire process. And this has huge implications for the safety of communities all around the country. Because if you don't, like this guy, he was there before the judge because he had a misdemeanor domestic battery charge, I believe it was. He was doing the right thing. He was facing justice. But Is the next guy going to come to court and face justice if he knows that he's got these ICE agents who are just going to try to track him down or run him off the road? How is the judge supposed to administer justice in her own community when the ICE agents are acting like a bunch of fascists and trying to round up as many people as they possibly can? It goes the same for schools and hospitals. It goes, what about reporting crime? If you've got people, too scared to report crime, I mean, it just has a whole bunch of negative implications that these idiots don't even think about. There's just so much incompetence when it comes to this Trump administration. They never think through what is actually going to be the end result of some of their actions. And instead, like we have seen with this administration, they try to put on this show of force. They try to make people comply by ruling with fear and fiat. They try to intimidate others to do exactly what they want. And they're going to make Americans all over the country less safe. This is what fascist regimes do. It is absolutely disgusting. It is un-American, and we need to continue to fight back every single day against this authoritarian regime. What they are doing is not okay. It is making people less safe, and it's just not the right way to go about things. Even if Judge Dugan is guilty in this particular event, and she, had a willful disobedience, and she tried to let this person out the back door because she didn't want him arrested in her courtroom, she should be held accountable for that. But in no way should the Trump administration be acting the way that they are here. It is absolutely uncalled for, and it just yet again goes to show that this administration is more concerned with optics, more concerned with getting the right narrative out there so they can rule with the iron thumb that they want to rule with. We got to fight back against the authoritarian regime. That's all I got to say. So I will leave it there for now, guys. If you guys got anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe. Maybe share with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. We are trying to build something here on the left that adequately pushes back against all of this fascist nonsense that we see day in and day out from this administration. So if you do like what I do here, please do remember to hit that subscribe button. It is free. And if you guys want to see how MAGA voters are now calling in to their favorite right-wing talk radio hosts to complain about this administration, be sure to watch that video on the screen now. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one.